I can play my ukulele.
Hey everybody, thank you all for joining us today for this webinar on Prospecting 101. Before we get started, just wanted to invite you all and just say we're going to give people between 3 to 5 minutes to kind of shuffle in here, getting out of kind of their past meetings and making sure that they get loaded into the GoToWebinar platform properly. So feel free to just take a quick bio break, grab a glass of water, get yourself settled in, and we'll begin shortly.
In the meantime, I'll play you a short song with my ukulele. Just kidding. See, like 18 people logging out.
Always value add the ukulele.
So while we're waiting, Aaron, do I get some fun facts about prospecting?
Well, we're just about to get started now.
What was your first sales role?
My first sales role, we'll get into that right away.
Okay.
I worked at Procter & Gamble, and I started off as a sales rep on their Gillette business. In terms of that, it was kind of a cool role though, because it was a bit of consulting and sales as a hybrid. So that's kind of where I got my start in sales. Learned a lot there about proper process and interacting with some folks there. So on to you, Katrin. How about you? What was your first sales role and what did it involve?
Well, sorry, first off, didn't mean to prompt everything. If we still need to wait another minute, that's okay. So I've been in commercial sales for 10 years plus. Really got my degree in marketing and then realized that you can make the big bucks in sales. And so I spent a couple of years in selling energy, and then I moved on to insurance, and then I moved on to selling elevators for about 3 years. And then I flipped the table and moved to Toronto and dived into the tech scene, which I love. And a lot of the learning at that point was really trying to understand everything we're going to be talking about today. So how we can use automation to make salespeople's lives so much easier, because sometimes the best sales rep can even be the laziest sales rep if you're using automation well and trying to just focus on the really high leverage tasks and the tasks that you need that kind of human touch for. So this is a really exciting topic, and yeah, glad we're able to speak to you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Really excited to dive in today. I think Katrin hit on a number of points. The big thing about prospecting today that we'll really touch on is prospecting in the 21st century as opposed to prospecting in the past. Anyhow, on that note, let's walk through the agenda. So just to get started, we want to give you guys a refresher on what is prospecting in general, kind of cover off some lead gen basics as well, just to get familiar with what the landscape looks like and what we're talking about and getting grounded. we'll move on to chat about a customer-centric approach. And thank you guys for voting, because those of you who got back to us with feedback, we got some great replies, and the audience choice for our topic this session is going to be determining your ideal customer and reaching them at scale. And this is going to be woven in with the customer-centric approach just because they tend to overlap in some areas. We'll talk about the power of LinkedIn, because this is a prospecting in the 21st century class, and that is a very big part of what the 21st century offers us, and conclude with email prospecting watchouts, how much is too much. So that's what we have on the agenda today. Also, what you'll see as well is there's a handout in the GoToWebinar that'll be distributed to you guys afterwards as well. The handout's going to cover some of our tips and tricks on how to handle various replies, whether they're positive, neutral, or negative. So check out that, and we'll kick things off now with what is prospecting. So to give you guys some background on prospecting and just start somewhere, let's define it. And basically, when we think about prospecting, it's all about identifying who a potential customer could be for your product or service. And the origins of this term, or the etymology, goes back to the days when people were surveying land for gold. And I think that that's quite apropos, because what you're looking at these days in the modern sense of the world is you're surveying a landscape for potential customers or people who are going to spend money on your product or service, therefore kind of finding that gold for yourself. So in the B2B world, that's what prospecting really is. It's about finding where you can have somebody who's willing to trade that value for your product or service. Now, Katrin mentioned something that was really important earlier, and that was about automation in prospecting and automation in the prospecting world. So just to let you know, while we're going through this webinar, we'll also be accompanying it with our Growth Genius app and showing you guys some tips and tricks using the app and using digital technology about how you can prospect effectively in the 21st century and save yourself on some of the intensive items on the left-hand side that add to you in terms of labor and capital investment. So looking at the left-hand side of things and looking at what prospecting entails, effective prospecting entails, there's a lot that goes into it. Most commonly at Growth Genius, we're finding that people come to us because they don't have a lot of time to spend on prospecting, or their budget is constrained. They may have a great product or service, but at that point in time, they're finding that they don't have a lot of investment that they can put into developing a whole sales team or sales force. So what's going on the left-hand side is you've got a lot of these drivers that put a lot of pressure on both time and capital. And that's where using technology can help make prospecting a lot easier. So just to kind of give you guys a quick view here into the app, I'll log right in and show you guys what it looks like. So when you log into the Growth Genius app, basically what we'll be reviewing today here is a lot of how to set up a campaign very simply. So we'll teach you kind of how to find prospects effectively and go over the strategy behind that and developing everything that goes into this search. We'll show you how those prospects become contacts and accounts, and how you can easily kick off a campaign, you know, kind of 1, 2, 3-step process using the app. So that's just an intro into the app here. We'll dive back into the presentation for now, but kind of hop back and forth between that and the presentation. So hopping back in here, we've kind of defined prospecting, but now let's talk about lead generation. So lead generation and the purpose of it is basically to take the prospects that you've identified and defined and understand which of these are going to become potential customers. So what this process looks like when we break it down is it's a two-step process for lead generation. And then the third step is very important. It's why we're doing lead generation. The first two steps are prospecting and qualification. So with prospecting, went over that, just defining that key audience group that you're looking at. And qualification is the second step. Qualification is about going through a rigorous process. This process involves initially reaching out cold in some cases, going through a follow-up cycle. So not just relying on one email to get the job done or one message. It's about maintaining a continuous conversation and workflow in order to make sure that you drive engagement with that prospect. Once they engage back, that's when they become a qualified lead. So when they engage back and say, yeah, I'm interested, let's have a conversation, or I'd like to hear more about your product or service, that's when you're actually engaging them and qualifying them as a lead. And that begins your process and your ability to actually convert them from what is simply a lead and then a prospect into an actual paying customer. So it's when you're actually realizing the value of your work. Now, when it comes to prospecting, what's really important here is to understand the answer to this question. Is there really a secret to success? And yes, there is. Success comes from grounding what you're doing in a way that it meets the needs of your core audience, of your customers. And I'm going to hand it over to Katrin now to chat a little bit about the importance of providing a properly defined customer profile and how that can influence the success or effectively break even your prospecting efforts.
Yeah, okay. So before joining the sales side of Growth Genius, I was actually one of our account managers. So I've worked on a lot of different campaigns. And something that I've found is that the more narrowly and carefully you can define who it is that you're reaching out to, the more interesting that message becomes. So if you can determine that the three target groups that you really want to be speaking with are fintech companies, health tech companies, and e-gaming companies, don't give all those people the same message. Make sure that the value proposition is unique to each of those groups, and that the case study that you're referencing is a case study that the e-gaming companies care about. Like, reference League of Legends when you're talking to those guys. Don't reference a hospital technical company that you worked with and generated a bunch of ROI for. Like, the e-gaming guys just won't care. So the more carefully that you can define who it is that you're targeting, the more successful this will be. And let's say you can work with anyone. I hear this a lot. Really, you're a service business and you can work with anyone under the stars. Well, pick a niche, pick an area that you're going to be focusing on for this specific campaign. It's great that you can work with everybody, but focus on one specific subgroup for this campaign so that you can make that message about them rather than just making it a laundry list about your own features and solutions. Talk about the problem that they're having and how you're solving for it in these messages. And by segmenting those lists really carefully, you can come out with a very refined message that feels so personalized to that one person. So that's a big recommendation on my end. Back to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Katrin. So you bring up a lot of key points and touch on a number of key messages. And when you start a campaign and really want to think about how to kick it off and how to jump into things with reaching out to customers and starting this messaging, and how to begin, it all starts with asking yourself these questions. And Katrin mentioned these, but if you want to take notes, write them down. And we'll also provide a copy of the deck following this. Basically, first of all, who are you and what do you do? Always introduce yourself if you're reaching out cold. Make sure that somebody understands what exactly you're bringing to the table. And that's where we segue into the second point. How can you help them? So make sure that you quickly pivot into them. Focus on them, their needs. Any case studies, any information, any social proofs that you're providing should be tailored to them, because they're going to care about what value you bring them, what value you offer them. Sales is often looked at as being an area where we talk at people, but the whole proponent of being successful in sales hinges on you being able to translate what their pain points are, what the value you offer is, and how you bring that to the table for them. It's very important to effectively communicate that when speaking to your leads, and doing so in a concise manner. Because in these days, we're a headline culture, Twitter culture. We're all about reading things in a very succinct message and succinct manner, because that's how we're absorbing information. We're jumping from one place to another, and we need to know what the point is, so get to it. The last point here about value proposition, I really want to emphasize something I learned very early in sales. I'm sure Katrin's heard it. The whole team at Growth Genius knows it cold, and that's features tell, benefits sell. That's the whole point here, is make sure you're talking about the benefit that you're providing your audience, as opposed to just strictly features about it. Like when we're selling Growth Genius, we're not talking about the fact that we're bringing an app to the table. There's a million apps out there. Great. What does your app do for me? Oh, it saves you time and can bring you more revenue. That's great. That's something I'm all of a sudden interested in. And all of a sudden you've transformed the conversation into something that they're going to care about. I'd like to also pause for a moment and thank Katrin for mentioning the e-gaming clients, because she knows those are near and dear to my heart. So thank you for providing that example. When you're looking at your customer profile and building it out, don't be afraid to leverage your current customers. So if you have customers and clients who've already bought from you, Katrin mentioned this when she was giving the example about the e-gaming client, and the fact that as you're expanding your outreach and talking to more clients in this area, what you'll want to do is leverage the fact that you've worked with one before. So first of all, you can leverage it as a social proof. But secondly, what you can do is leverage it for an understanding of your audience. So again, asking what they need, asking the pains that they experience and the benefits you provide them, but grounding it in an area of what industry are they in? Why did they buy me in the first place? And understand, is this something, and this is where we get into scalability, is this something that is scalable across this industry? Because all of a sudden, you're not limited to your one customer being your only customer in that industry, but you've scaled your value proposition and your understanding of their pain points and needs. And because of that, you're able to tap into a broader pool of prospects. So just going to pause for a second and show you a little bit about how this works in our app. So I've saved a view here for us to go through. That's under the marketing decision makers in the internet. Let's say that we want to reach a bunch of directors of marketing and brand managers in this space, in the internet space, and kind of go over how we would do that. So the first thing, first and foremost, is we know that we're interested in a certain title group, so directors of marketing and brand managers. And in terms of location, we'll say for the sake of this example that we're restricted to these 4 cities. Got to give Toronto a bit of love here because Growth Genius is based in Toronto, so have to make sure that that's included. And then what we'll do is we'll layer in the industry. For now, we'll just put in internet, and I'll show you why, because we're going to go through this exercise of expanding it. And basically, what you'll see is we've found 15,000 prospects. I'm just going to hit the refresh button. Make sure that this is there we go. So now we've got our 15,000 prospects, number of pages of them that we can look into. And what we're doing here is understanding, okay, who are the prospects that we'd like to speak to? That's the first first point. We've already identified that they have a certain profile, so directors of marketing, brand managers, these locations, and in this industry. In talking about our expansion of how we might look to grow our target audience, or how we might look to reapply this, just say that we've maybe worked with somebody at Tarte Cosmetics, and that's allowing us to expand our understanding. So maybe because we've worked with Tarte Cosmetics, what we actually want to do is change this and look into beauty. We'll bring up the cosmetic space specifically. Now, in bringing up the cosmetic space, we all of a sudden have 7,000 prospects that we can take from our Tarte Cosmetics example and double down on effectively. So that's a little bit about how you can take one customer, one successful customer at Tarte Cosmetics, and expand them to understanding that we want to speak to this wider group of prospects. Now, once you've grown with one prospect group, you say expanded through that cosmetics example, what you can do is understand that there are adjacent markets that you can maybe expand to. So this is another point about scalability here, is it's very important to understand that there are like and overlapping categories and industries that you can tap into in order to reach new customers and new clients. So you'll see this tip here provides an example. If you're focused on the wealth management sector as a starting point, for example, with your offering, what you might want to do is expand that afterwards to reaching advisory and mutual funds, perhaps insurance, if that's what your solution can be tailored to. So if you can fit that solution to more people's needs, that's going to help you with your scalability. So again, what I'll do is just show you an example in the app about what we could do in that case. So if we reached out to the beauty and cosmetic space and we've kind of doubled down there and we're really happy with it, what we could say is maybe the consumer goods space is an area that we'd like to focus on. So you focus on consumer goods, and because of beauty's overlap with luxury products, we can also take a look at luxury and jewelry. And so all of a sudden you have a much broader prospect pool to tap into. Now, that being said, because you're tapping into a wider audience, you may want to find other things to scale back on here. For example, if you are focused on the beauty industry, you may not be looking at tapping into, say, cereal brands and stuff like that. So what you may want to do is make sure that you're excluding certain companies or certain keywords from these searches, and you have that ability in the app here. When you're happy with your prospect searches in the app, what you can always do is save these views. And what you're able to do from there is then transport these prospects into lists to organize them or directly into campaigns. Before we get into that though, we'll just dive a little bit more back into the theory and process behind sales and prospecting. So as we move forward, what I want to address head on is LinkedIn. We've all seen one of these messages come up at some point in our LinkedIn feeds. Somebody saying at the start, no, I do not want to connect with you. The key thing here, the key message that I would give to everybody is read between the lines here, because what he's saying is if there is not a clear benefit we can provide each other, he doesn't want to connect with you. The key thing that he's adding on here that makes it important to understand that LinkedIn is first and foremost an area where you are designed to network and connect with professionals and not to be afraid to do so, even for the purposes of procuring business. The real stats on LinkedIn and the numbers behind it are simple. There's 61 million users that are senior level influencers. 40 million users have decision-making authority. So these people in these groups are ready to buy, and they have the power to buy a product or service. And when we look down here, we see that 86% of LinkedIn B2B buyers will engage if sales professionals provide insights about their business. So going back to our fundamentals about prospecting and about how to reach out, how to define your audience, if you are reaching a relevant consumer with a relevant message, then a platform like LinkedIn is fair game for you. So don't be shy about using this platform. Katrin, if you don't mind, would love for you to jump in here and share a few examples about how we found success on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so something I recommend is not to reinvent the wheel when you're thinking about creating a email or a LinkedIn campaign and reaching out to people at scale. What I mean by that is I think what happens is that we get into, when we're copywriting and figuring out what kind of message we're going to use to reach out to hundreds or thousands of people within a target market, we start getting really, really scripted. And that's when you end up with those really cheesy templates that just sound like a sales template. So what I like to think of instead, the best way to use these tools and reach out to this kind of large audience is think about what you're doing manually today. So if I always kind of say, if you had a really great cup of coffee and you were sitting down for like 3 to 5 hours and you had all that time just to Google the perfect customers and to go on LinkedIn and find exactly who you want your next 3 to 5 clients, who you want them to be, use those criteria to make your list. And then what would your first message look like? Would you say something about how you have someone in common? Would you talk about how there's actually something really interesting happening in the way that Amazon's terms and services are changing, and asking them whether they know about this? Whatever entryway you would have to starting a conversation with a potential customer, use that same phrasing, use that same language. One of the terms that we use a lot internally is beer language. So never write out your copy in that kind of formal email tone. Instead, think of if you're sitting at the bar with someone and they ask you, what do you do? How would you have that conversation? And try to use that language when you're writing out your messaging. And the whole goal here is that we're just taking what you're doing on a daily basis manually and scaling it times 100. And that's always the goal, is not to lose that degree of authenticity or that nice like personalization and that really honest feel, but just be able to do it at a scale that's actually going to grow your business and not leave you at the end of the month having only reached out to 20 people because that's all you had the time for. So that would be my biggest recommendation. There's things like soft offers that you can use that work really, really well to help really drive that conversation. The more specific, again, that you can get to speaking about the problem that that specific person is having. So even looking at role titles. So what problem does the CFO have in an organization versus the owner CEO? I'm sure they're caring about ultimately very different things. One is trying to move the business forward and lead. The other one is ultimately trying to keep everything moving and making sure the finances are in place. So how are you going to help those two different people? And really the best kind of campaigns are going to offer a different solution to each of those groups. So again, going back to segmenting well and making a message that's very direct to those people, now you can take what you're doing already and scale it to a really impressive degree and really grow your business. That's what I would recommend.
Great, thanks, Katrin. So basically, what Katrin's hitting on here and saying directly is LinkedIn is all about targeted, personalized communication. And that's really critical here. You don't want to hit people with mass messages. The power in the platform is to grow your network. That's what you have to think about it as too. You're growing your network and do so in a meaningful way. And again, always create value for your connections. So our process at Growth Genius is you connect with your prospects, and then the follow-up sequence kicks in, and then you're able to engage them. And I'll walk you through what that looks like in the platform right now. We'll actually create a LinkedIn campaign right now live, just to give you an idea of what this can look like. So just pulling this up, we'll simply go to create a campaign. We'll name it Webinar LinkedIn Reach Out. We're going to set the campaign as a LinkedIn type. This is where you set your campaign as either a LinkedIn or email type. You have the ability to set a daily message send limit. So this is going to limit the amount of messages you're sending every day, fairly straightforward. We'll set ours to 60. And we're going to add our contacts from a list that we've preloaded. So I have a pre-list of contacts set from the internet industry that I've already kind of pulled in earlier. So as we go to our next step, we'll be able to add contacts additionally. So going back here. So if you have a CSV file, or if you have a pre-existing database of contacts, you're able to use those and upload those into our app kind of at your own will, because the objective here is to make sure that we're making things simple for you. So we want to make sure that you're able to use existing data that you already have on our application. If you do upload data, you'll be able to map fields here. There's a few helpful videos available on the Growth Genius website that kind of go over some tutorials here. If you run into any questions or concerns about this process, you can just shoot me an email after this seminar and we can kind of go through that process in more detail. Now we're going to add messages. So I've already provided an example first LinkedIn message, and I'll just populate that here. You'll see what I've done is I've added a few areas where we call these snippets. And what a snippet is it's taking information that will vary throughout the contact set. So these are variables that are going to change depending on who you're reaching out to. I'm actually going to change custom one. I'm going to change that to their company. And when we go to our map message previewer, what you'll actually see is, as an example for Catherine, saw you're the director of marketing at photos.com, or if we change it to say Dawn's the director of marketing at Torco. So you'll see the messages vary based on the contact's name, their title, their company. So these variables play into the messaging to help make it feel very personal and help it feel very targeted. And that's the intent of this platform, is to really create that personal touch and personal connection to the outreach that you're planning on doing, so it doesn't feel completely cold. One thing to take note of is this first message in a LinkedIn campaign is going to be the contact request. So we're not hitting people's inboxes directly with InMail. This is going through a connection request first. And then once the contact has accepted the connection request, then follow-up messages will trickle through according to these rules you set. So if they accept, then 2 days later, let's say, we can say, hi, go in here, first name, thanks for accepting my connection request. So as you can see here, what we're doing is we're creating that personalization again, making it feel very, very one-to-one in how we're reaching out to people, and making sure that we apply rules like these sending rules so that it feels like you're following up in a certain rhythm. The second comment here about follow-ups is this is going to happen behind the scenes. So you no longer have to set a reminder in your calendar or in your CRM to follow up with Vitaly 2 days after he's accepted your connection request, because it's going to happen automatically. So you'll save a lot of time and a lot of your mental energy that you would spend stressing over follow-ups, especially on busy days. And what you're doing is using this platform to effectively translate that into your communication and your personalization. Now, it's important to remember that when you're following up using LinkedIn, using email, any platforms, that following up is an art. It's not a science. So what I mean by that is there's no silver bullet. Some people won't want to receive a follow-up message 2 days after they receive the first message. Some people will love it because it's showing your urgency and you're really speaking to their current needs. So what you want to do is always take into consideration these criteria. What's the industry I'm prospecting into? Is it an industry where communication happens regularly? After P&G, I worked in the media sales industry. When I was in the media sales industry, I was finding that you needed to follow up with people at least a couple times a week. And you needed to follow up with them a couple times a week, sometimes for a number of months before you got certain replies. So in that industry, it was purely acceptable to be following up on a regular basis and having that rhythm. In other industries, or depending on the audience that you're speaking to that third point there, if you're speaking to a CEO, they may not want to receive an email every 2 days because they're busy, they have other priorities. So maybe for them, the right rhythm is once a week. So take these factors into consideration and make sure that you build them into your consideration set when you're strategizing how you want to follow up. These are all critical components of a successful campaign, and they need thought, care, and attention built into them. So we kind of looked at how to structure follow-ups using our app, but I'll take you through another example that's going to use our email platform. So you can actually see an email example as well today. So I'll just take a look at this quick email example here. And basically, this is an actual one that we're using here at Growth Genius. And what you're seeing here is, again, that deep personalization. So making sure that the messages are all tailored toward Trinity. You'll also see that in our emailing platform, what we have the ability to do is actually program in your own email signatures. So this is all available through our platform in order to make sure that these emails feel and are completely legit and oriented toward that business approach. You can see here as well, there's a number of follow-ups with a different set of rules. So follow-up 1 happens, you can see 2 days after email 1 is sent. Email 3 comes 2 days after email 2, email 4, 4 days after, and email 5, 5 days after. So there's a regular rhythm happening to this sequence, and this sequence completes after those 5 emails. If I chose to, what I could always do is add a new follow-up email and set it a certain amount of days after email 5 in order to continue the rhythm. The other thing that you'll see here that's interesting, and I'll just call this out really quickly because this is a really neat feature, is you can always split test as well. So you'll notice that email 1 is split into email 1A and 1B. And my audience set for these emails was split down the middle. So when you create a split test, what happens is your contact list is split directly in half. And the purpose for a split test is to test different rates of opens and replies. So you'll see here that I actually had a much higher open rate with email 1A. So now what I could even do is simply delete email 1B as a method of optimizing this campaign, because as I add more contacts to it, email 1A seems to be working much better. So it's important to incorporate those learnings as you go through the sales process. So that's our agenda today. We whipped through it in great time. Thank you guys for taking part here. You can sign up for the platform today at app.growthgenius.com/sign up. And if you want as well, you can shoot me an email with any questions or concerns you have. I'll be able to follow up today with the handout that's backed on the GoToWebinar here if you haven't downloaded it already. And you can reach out to us at any time if you have any questions or concerns about prospecting. Katrin, anything you wanted to add as we sign off here?
I just want to say, like, add us on LinkedIn if you're not already connected. Always love chatting about anything lead generation. If you're not sure about experimenting with something or want any tips or tricks, definitely reach out to us, and please, yeah, connect on LinkedIn. Try out the app, share with some friends, pass on any feedback that you have with us, because this is something that is an ever moving target. We're just continuing to build and build on it. And your feedback could be the next big feature in the Growth Genius app. So yeah, that's all I'd add. And yeah, this is a ton of fun. Great job, Aaron.
Thanks, everybody. We'll close with some ukulele.
Unless you guys want some more ukulele. That's all I got. I actually just got it a little while ago for camping. It's brand new, and I'm pretty terrible at it. But anyways, this is what's happening whenever I'm on mute on a Zoom call.
Okay, these are going to be monthly things, so we'll check in on your ukulele.
All right, thanks everyone. There we go. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's gonna be like Van Moore.